Welcome to today's presentation of Audit Your Website. Today's presentation is part of the digital toolbox from RoundPeg. And my name is Lorraine Ball, and I'm going to be your host for today's session as we talk about how you can objectively look at your website and begin developing an action plan for improvement. When I talk about auditing a website, there are really 5 areas that we want to look at. We want to look at design, the kind of visual impact of your website. We want to look at the content, the words, the pictures, the video, the information that's available on the site. Conversion is the next piece of the puzzle, and this is really how you help prospects move through your website from initial experience to filling out a contact form. We're going to touch briefly on search and SEO because what good is a website if nobody can find it? And we're going to finish up with just a quick conversation on control. Okay, let's get started. First thing, design. First impressions matter. And if the first impression of your website isn't a good one, people may not stay around for the rest of your message. And so the first question you have to ask yourself is your website outdated? Does it look old-fashioned? Does it look like you don't care to keep it up? And here's the real challenge. In the life of your website, 2 years is a lifetime. The technology moves so quickly. Design trends, just the capabilities of your website. And if your website's more than about 2 years old and you really haven't touched it, you haven't made any improvements along the way, it's going to start to look a little outdated. Although we don't run into as many websites that suffer from this anymore, there are still websites out there that are not mobile responsive. And you just can't do that anymore. Not only are you disappointing visitors, about half of your traffic now is coming from mobile devices in almost every industry, but you're also going to hurt your SEO because Google basically came out and said, here's the deal. If your website is not mobile responsive, if somebody is searching, not necessarily for you by name, but for a company in your industry, if your website is not mobile responsive, we're just not going to send traffic your way because you're not creating a good user experience. And one of the things that we saw just a few years ago that, again, if your website is still in this category, it's time for an upgrade. But your website needs to be truly mobile responsive. And mobile adaptive is not acceptable. When we first started getting smartphones, what we saw was full-size websites were then kind of scaled down for mobile devices. And they looked okay on the phone, except you couldn't actually read anything. If you wanted to read any of the information, you kind of had to stretch and grow. And if your website is still in this category, we need to talk. What is mobile responsive? Mobile responsive is really thinking about your website differently for desktop and mobile devices. This is actually one iteration back of our website, but you'll notice some real differences between the desktop and the mobile. First off, this cute little button here is lovely on desktop. On mobile, it would just get in the way, so we took it off. The next thing is that there are 2 columns of information on the desktop. Well, on mobile, instead of making things smaller so they all fit, this column actually stacks underneath this. So your website really shifts. And one of the things that we've started doing, and we see a lot of good developers are doing this, you almost build mobile first. You think about what's it need to be for a mobile environment and then work backwards and add features for the desktop environment. Okay, the other piece of design is really when somebody comes to your website, what should visitors do? And this is often a push and pull because there's what you want them to do and what they want to do. And so you need to think about, what do customers want to do when they come to your website? And so we actually worked with a restaurant that had both a breakfast lunch place and a dinner place. When people came to the dinner site, what they wanted to do was make a reservation. Yes, they could see the menu, and that's further down on the page, but what the restaurant really wanted and what they got the most calls from people about was not, do you have fish on the menu? It's, can I make a reservation? And so that's the very first thing that people saw. Now, when they first launched, they didn't have an online reservation form. And so for them, that interactive phone number was the very first thing people saw. But for their lunch place, what people really wanted, you don't make reservations necessarily for lunches. They want to see the menu. What do you guys serve? And so this customer with two very different restaurants took two very different approaches to that first action. And you need to think about that for your website as well. And if you find yourself saying, well, I'm going to have 3 calls to action, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and people can choose, I'm going to tell you the truth. The research shows that when you present people with multiple options, you actually increase the chances that they won't do any of those things. So, first actions, let me give you a couple of different examples and think about which one of these might work for you. First action, if you have a business where you're not necessarily selling products online or you're not necessarily booking appointments, you just want people to learn a little bit more about you, then give them a learn more option. This is a website we built for Randall Beans, and they sell their product in grocery stores, but what they know is that they will build their community if they get people using the product. And so the very first thing they want people to do is not necessarily go to the buy more or learn about the product. They want people to get excited about what they can do with the product. And so in this instance, learn more goes to browse recipes. Maybe you have a business that what you really want to do is set that first appointment. And so don't be shy. Put that schedule a free consultation right at the top of the page, right as soon as somebody gets there, so they know that's what we're supposed to do. And maybe you're in a business where people actually do buy. Well, then that's what should be right in your call to action. You'll have some other information down low, but it's all about the buy now. So before you decide what is your call to action, you really need to think about, what is your sales process? What's the likelihood that someone is going to come to your website to actually buy, or what is it that they're coming to your website for? The next thing that you need to think about is something called vertical hierarchy, because after someone gets through this first box, if they don't take that call to action, what is it that you're going to present next? And so this company had a pretty logical flow. They're driving this 7 hours a day, 7 days a week. They had this button for see our services. Later, they actually changed it to get a quote, because once they lived with this website for a while, they realized that was really what they wanted. But maybe somebody is like, well, I don't know if I want to see all the services. I want to know kind of what industries they're in. Well, then we presented a little bit more information. The next section was really a video that actually gave them a little more. There was a testimonial and then questions and get a quote. So there was a logical flow through the page. There was information presented in rows. And this particular customer chose to do this in alphabetical order because that made sense to them. But you don't have to, and I'm going to tell you that that may not always be the best choice. Why? On desktop, these are side by side, but on mobile, this comes first, this comes next, and so on. Now, the good news for this client is commercial plumbing was the biggest part of their business. So as you are thinking about a row of information, remember that when you go mobile, what's left to right on desktop is going to be stacked one on top of the other on mobile. Okay, the next piece of the design is the navigation. How do I move from one place to another on your website? One of the things you want to do is avoid overwhelming people, presenting so much information in the navigation that they don't know where to go. This was a website we did for a high school down in Evansville, and every one of the items in their navigation had these huge drop downs, and they had so many things. They actually had to have a 2-row navigation. And the worst part is there was so much information shoved in the navigation that it really didn't make any sense. If you've ever taken over a job or a filing system from someone else, you know that as you're digging around in the file cabinets, you find stuff and you think, well, why did they put it there? Well, that's exactly what a cluttered navigation is. It's like a file cabinet that stuff has been shoved in there, and not only can't you find it, but your users can't. And these days, most of your users are going to use the search bar more than they are dropping down and looking in the navigation to find what they're looking for. And so one of the things that we did when we redesigned the site was that we simplified the navigation, and for those drop downs, when you got into prospective families, instead of having it here, if you weren't interested in prospective families and you really were more interested in alumni, you would just zip over it and there wouldn't be all that cluttered navigation. But if this was what you were interested in and you clicked on that page, well, then there was a secondary navigation that appeared only for people who were really interested in this. So as you think about your website and you think about people moving through your website, recognize that somebody who's interested in this down here may not be interested in this here. Also, what this primary and secondary navigation allows is I can move through these sections very easily without always going back to the menu and dropping down again, because this navigation stays visible as I move through this part of the website. Other ways to improve your navigation. Well, number one, simplify. Every page that's on your website does not need to be in the navigation or in the primary navigation, as you just saw. The second thing is that you really want to improve the search function on your website, because this is how people are going to find all those hidden gems. When you come to the Round Peg website, you may think, oh, there's, 8, 10 pages there. With all of our blog posts, we have about 4,500 pages of content. That is a lot of information, and all of it is valuable to somebody. Well, with good tagging and page names and appropriate use of titles and subtitles, you can come to a website, type in just what you're looking for, and only the related pages will show up. You want to limit that drop-down menu because it really becomes a very cumbersome and cluttered thing, and it really does not aid in making it easy for people to find information. You want to take advantage of interior menus. The software now really allows you to create some great side menus and top menus so that when you're in a particular section, you can really navigate and jump through all of the information in that section without ever going back to the home page. And you want to have logical next steps. At the bottom of every single page on your website, there should be information on what you do next. It's kind of like those late night commercials when you get something, the Ronco knife that slices and dices and purees and chops, and wait, there's more. If you buy now, you get this. You need to think about that for your website, because you see, somebody gets to the bottom of a page and there isn't a, well, if you liked this information, click here for more, make an appointment, call us, download this, do that. If there's no logical next step, they might leave. Don't leave it up to a visitor and assume they're going to know that the next thing they're supposed to do is call you. Make it really obvious on every single page. If you liked this, here's where you go next. And from a design perspective, you really don't need a sidebar. This is kind of a holdover from several years ago. People thought, well, I have my main information in my sidebar, and it lets me put this information side by side. Here's the challenge. On mobile, do you know what happens to the sidebar? It's going to slide underneath your primary content. And if that's the case, well, just design it that way. Design it without sidebars. Okay, talked a lot about design. Now it's time to switch over and talk about what's really inside your website, the meat of your website. Let's talk first about some common content mistakes. I just edited something today, and it was the perfect example of you-centered content. There were about 8 paragraphs in this content, and every single paragraph started with we do this to help our clients, we do this, we do that, we have this experience. Well, first off, it is incredibly boring to read 8 paragraphs that all start the same way, but I could just hear the chest thumping and them sort of puffing up and telling you how important they were, and I was so turned off. You need to have customer-centered content. I know this is your website and you think it's about you, but if you want to sell something, it needs to be about your customer. The website needs to tell customers that they've come to the right place, and they don't necessarily feel they've come to the right place if you're busy telling them about your credentials and not solving their problem. So a good test for you is to print out the information on a page on a website and circle every time you use first-person language, we, us, our, and then underline every time or circle in a different color every time you use second-person language, you, businesses like you, customers like you, sentences that the customer can relate to and go, yeah, that's me, that's my problem. The ratio should be 2 to 1. You should have twice as many second-person sentences as first-person sentences. That's the mark of a good customer-focused message. The first thing a customer sees should not be your credentials. The first thing a customer sees is something that helps them know they've come to the right place, that you can solve their problem, and then you earn the right to show them your credentials. Impersonal content. There is a line between being professional and being robotic. Nobody wants to read robotic text. Now, our website has a very casual tone, and that works for us. But when I write web copy for an accounting firm or a law firm, I get a little more professional, but there's still a more personal style. It still feels like it's written by human beings. And you can do that a lot with word choice. You can sound professional without sounding pretentious. Stale and shallow content. There was a time when people thought they needed to have a page for every single service that they offered, even if there was only a paragraph on the page. These days, search engines consider that shallow content. If you have 5 services and you have 100 words for each one of them, put all 5 services on one page. Create one keyword-rich, relevant page. The second thing is stale content. Now, if your business doesn't really change, it's hard to go back in and change and edit your primary pages. But a blog, what's new in the company, a feature area where you focus on an employee or you talk about a product, service, or case study, where you're constantly adding a little bit of new information. You don't have to redo the entire site, but a little new information every week or two will certainly help improve, well, it'll improve the user experience and give them a reason to come back, and it'll improve your search standings. If you've got large blocks of content, you want to think about adding subheads for 2 reasons. One, it's easier for your readers to scan through the copy and figure out where the information is that they need, and it also helps search engines index and categorize your pages. In general, if you have a paragraph that's more than about 5 or 6 lines on your desktop, you need to divide it. Grammatically, it may be correct, but you are not writing the next great Mishner novel. I mean, he had paragraphs that went on for pages. Don't do that. It's really hard when somebody is reading online to follow your thought process, because we look away from our screens, and then when you look back, you can't figure out exactly where you were. And as long as that paragraph may look on a desktop, imagine reading it on an iPhone. Or don't imagine, go ahead and look at that paragraph on an iPhone and see how hard it is to read it. So break up your paragraphs, a little bit of white space, and add some subheads to divide it and improve the flow. I've talked about this before in the last section. It is a huge mistake not to offer people a logical next step, not to offer them some tools or some resources that help establish you as a subject matter expert. And watch your jargon. I've talked a little bit about being pretentious. If you are in an industry that has a lot of buzzwords and terms, I came out of HVAC, heating, air conditioning, ventilation. And we often would talk about a FUI and HSPF and SSER, and we knew what we were talking about, but our customers or potential customers didn't. And so anytime you use jargon, make sure that you put in parentheses next to it, SEER, seasonal energy efficiency ratio. Now, you don't have to do that every time you use that term, but the first time you introduce a term on any page on your website, because every page on your website can be a landing page, you should define it, and then you don't have to throughout the rest of the document. And lack of attention to detail. And I'm going to tell you, this is my Achilles heel. I don't see commas. I don't see characters reversed. I just don't. That's why I have other people edit my work, because when you publish a page on your website that has typos, that clearly looks like you slapped it up there, that's the message that you're sending. And you want to make sure that you don't do that. You want to make sure that people really know you care about the work that you do. And if you're like me and you just don't see it, make sure you hire somebody who does. Next thing is, I really want to drive home the point that words matter, and you need to know who you're talking to. 5 companies selling the same product or service will have dramatically different messages based on who their target customers are. For example, web companies. Now, this is an industry I kind of know something about, and I'm going to show you 5 websites, none of them are ours, that took very different approaches based on their customers. Oops. Oh, darn. I'm going to pause for just a moment because you're not going to see my example. So, example, web companies. This particular web company, they are not interested in working with individual companies. They do not want the average business owner calling them. Who their customer is companies like mine who want to outsource some web development. And so you've got it right here. Freelance WordPress development, and you can tell that they're not talking to the average customer because they go right into PSD to WordPress. This is not language that the average customer is going to understand. And they don't care because their customers are other agencies. So I think this is a really good example of very focused messaging for a very unique niche. Conversely, I think these guys kind of missed it. I know what they meant when they said level up your website. The problem is this is internal messaging. This is the kind of thing that a web designer might say to another website. We're going to raise the level of a website. The problem is that the average business owner is not laying awake at night going, God, I wish I could level up my website. It's not language that a customer would use, and so they really missed the boat. Another example, these guys actually do phenomenal work, but I think they really missed the point because they were like unleashing the creative potential in your people, but what does that mean? What am I supposed to do with that? So I think the messaging here was irrelevant for the services that they were selling and the audience that they were selling to. Again, they were speaking more to kind of their passion and what they cared about, and really not thinking about how a business might look at it. I think these two are actually great examples. The first one, grow your revenue with inbound marketing and sales the smart way. I think this really addresses what business owners care about, revenue. Now, the one change I would have made in this sentence is I would have bolded the word revenue and sales, because in this sentence, business owners are going to care less about being smart and care more about growing revenue. So the sentence was good, but the emphasis was wrong. And this last one is actually one of my favorite examples because I think they speak directly to what customers care about. They were very focused on e-commerce and digital marketing, and they specifically said, increase your sales and profitability, learn how we can help. So in both of these cases, you've got a good value proposition and an appropriate call to action. So subtle changes can really make your messaging much more impactful. And before we leave the subject of content, yes, you need a blog. You need to be creating on a regular basis keyword-rich, relevant, new content. You're not going to change your homepage every month, but a blog gives you a way to add new information about your products, your services, your people, events you're having, things that you're doing, interesting articles that your customers may want to learn more about. And I will tell you that we do blogs for companies across a wide range of industries. everything from beans in glass jars to accounting and law firms to companies that run tours to the Holy Land. You need a blog. And it's time to say goodbye to generic photos. These images that you grab from a stock photo library that everybody uses. And, you know, the handshake, the generic handshake, the desperate handshake, people writing on walls, and this makes me crazy. I know what they're trying to get at. They're trying to get to this idea that, you know, if you work with us, you're going to grow. But here's the truth. You pull a plant out of the dirt, and you know what? That thing's going to die. So these pictures, number one, they're generic, they're overused, they've been used a million times. Number two, I don't know that they send the message you really want to send. So if you want to immediately improve the quality of your website, get rid of the generic photos. Get some good professional photos, or just get some good photos that are real. And specifically of your employees. Do not put pictures like this on your website and pretend that this ethnically diverse, age-balanced group of people actually works for you. Because not only do I know that they don't, I also wonder why you would show a picture of people sitting around a conference table with blank sheets of paper in their hand. Every time. Real people every single time. And, you know, you're looking at these photos. We shot these photos with a camera. We did have a little bit of good lighting. And yes, because we're a design firm, we had some fun putting some blue boxes around the pictures. But really, we shot these in our kitchen here at Round Peg. And the cool thing is taking them to black and white hides a little bit of the, I don't know how to put it. There is clarity that a professional photographer will have that an amateur photographer just won't have that same high quality, high resolution lens. But it's okay because the black and white photo actually helps hide some of that. But these photos, real pictures of who we are and what we work on, help sell it every single day. Okay, moving away from content, switching over to conversion. When people come to your website, how do you engage them and move them through your website? You've got to have places throughout the site where you're encouraging action. You want to have a clear first step. I actually checked recently and this website is still up. You get to their homepage and there's a bunch of links, but what am I supposed to do first? Where do I go? Now, this is pretty awful, and there are not a lot of sites that still look like this, but there are more than you would imagine. This is a little more common, where you have some information. There is a call to action. It's here in the sidebar. The problem is that these other images are actually bigger and more interesting, and they are not as important as this. This is what she really wants people to do. So use that vertical hierarchy to establish priority. Hey, you got here? This is what we want you to do. And encourage a specific action. Pick one thing that you really want people to do. In this instance, what this company wanted was to get people to sign up for a demo. If you didn't sign up for a demo, they gave you some more information on why you want to do that. And then, oh, by the way, sign up for a demo. It's okay to ask people more than once to do the same thing. And every page is a landing page on your website. So this is Tish Flooring. And this is actually inside their website. This is their style gallery. Although this is their hardwood flooring gallery. So there's a little bit of information. And if somebody comes, we always give them an option of, hey, schedule an appointment. But if you're browsing hardwood, we know that you're probably buying hardwood floors and maybe for the first time. And so, oh, download our flooring guide. And if you click here and you download it, you have to give us your email address to get it. Now, if you click on one of the individual flooring types, well, now we know you're a little more interested. You're not just a casual visitor because you've clicked a couple of times to get to some different places, and we give you a few options. You can favorite the page, and if you really love it, you can schedule an appointment and tell us what you're interested in. Logical next steps. What can you offer people? Well, I'm going to give you a pretty long list. So if you tell me that none of these work for you, I'm going to tell you you're not looking hard enough. You can, at the bottom of the page, invite someone to read a blog, download a resource, take a quiz, or schedule an appointment. Maybe, like we did with my flooring customers, create an account so that you can save your favorites, register for an event, subscribe to a newsletter, or simply submit a contact form. Ask a question. Look at photos, look at our portfolio, search our frequently asked questions, watch a video, or if you're ready, buy now. And this is not a complete list. There are way more things that you can do at the bottom of a page depending on your business. But this hopefully will get you started thinking about what should people do. Some additional conversion tips. You want to give people information in small bites, and you want to ask for information in small bites. If you want someone to fill out a form, do not give them a form that asks them their name, their phone number, their email, their address, and the ages of their 3 children. Only ask for what you absolutely have to move the sale to the sales process to the next level. Limit choices. If you're creating a landing page, do not give people 5, 6, 7 different things they can choose. A landing page should have one option. You came here for this information. Here's the info. Now let's go to the next step. Some landing pages will be designed with what they call no way out. You get to it, you take the navigation off, you just have the information somebody came from. I always like to have a logo in the upper left-hand corner so someone can back out, but the idea is if someone is searching the internet for carpet buying information and they get on your page for your carpet buying guide, you want them to fill out the form before they go anywhere else. And you don't want them distracted by other things in your navigation. Recognize that different people have different learning styles. And so consider adding little audio files or video files or infographics along the way to grab the attention of different types of people. And respond promptly. If somebody fills out a form on your website, don't wait a week before you send them an email. Make sure that you've got an auto response built into your website. And again, don't ask for too much information. Don't make people fill out a really long form if they just want to download a white paper. And just because you build it doesn't mean that people will come. And you will hear me say this a lot, but the best place to hide a dead body is on page 2 of Google. So make sure that's not where you show up. Now, we do a whole session just on SEO, but here's a couple of things you can do right away. You can look at the number of keywords you have on a page and stop trying to get one page to rank for 6 different keywords. If they're all important, they should all have a page that has 500 or 600 words of content to support that keyword. Used to be able to game the system by creating page titles or tags that had nothing to do with the page. It doesn't work anymore. Google is smart. If you say that this page is about white horses, and when I get to the page, all I hear about or all I read is speckled ponies and black mares, you're actually going to get dinged if you tried to sneak in a tag for a word that doesn't even exist on the page. Repetitive page titles and meta descriptions. A lot of basic SEO tools will create a standard page title and meta description. The problem is that every page on your website will have the same title. And when Google sees 5, 6, 10, or 20 pages all with the same title, they just assume the pages are duplicate and they don't index all of your other pages. So make sure, and when I say a page title, it's not the page title that's visible to you. It's the page title that is coded into the website so that when Google reads the page and searches, it's the title that Google reads and the meta description that Google reads. Make sure that you use headers and subheads on the pages. Again, that information, what's called the H1s and H2s, help search engines prioritize. It helps the search engines read the page and go, oh, this page is about racing horses that race horses, and it's about thoroughbred race horses. And oh, look, there's a little section down here on trotters. And inconsistent citations, what that is it's the name, address, and zip code of your company. Make sure that everywhere your contact information appears, that it looks consistent. This unlabeled pictures issue is becoming actually a bigger one as we start to move into an era of more accessibility guidelines. Somebody who is looking at your website who is visually impaired and is using a tool to navigate your website can read all your content. And then they roll over an image and the tool that they're using tells them, oh, this is a picture. Well, what's it a picture of? Well, the picture is called JPEG 1, so it must be a picture of a JPEG. Make sure when you're loading pictures to your website that you are titling them Mary Smith, accountant, Bob Jones, professional chef, example, sheet metal fabrication, whatever the picture is. Imagine someone who is visually impaired using your website and make sure that you're creating an experience for them. Also, make sure that you're continually adding new and relevant information and avoiding duplicate content. This again was a trick that a lot of companies tried to do, particularly if they had service companies and they served more than one community. They would create a page called Indianapolis Heating and Air Conditioning, and then they would copy all the same content onto a page called Carmel Heating and Air Conditioning. Well, Google got smart and they recognized that the information was the same, and so they actually dinged companies for having that duplicate information. And thin content is simply putting up a page with less than 500 words. Now, it's okay if your home page has less than 500 words. That's more of a directory, like a sign at a shopping mall that drives people and lets them know where they need to go. But those interior pages need to have more information. Some other quick tips. You want to make sure that your keywords are in balance, that you use natural language. And if I read your web copy out loud, it doesn't sound tedious to my ears. So you don't want to hear something like Joe's Heating and Air Conditioning is a heating and air conditioning company serving communities in, or serving customers in Indianapolis and Carmel and Fishers. And our heating and air conditioning technicians are, no, nobody talks like that. So you should use a ratio. If there's 500 words on the page, maybe 2 or 3 times you use the keyword. If there's 1,000, you can use it a little bit more. Another thing that you can do is you can use synonyms, so it makes it a little bit less repetitive. You want to have a purpose for every page. You want to make sure the pages are updated periodically. And if you are linking to other content, that the content you're linking to is relevant. Okay, control. And this is really the last thing I want to talk about today. If your website was hit by a bus, what would happen to your website? We've had customers who had a website designed by a company that went out of business. And when their domain came up for renewal, there was nobody there to renew it, and the website went down. Or they wanted to make changes and they couldn't because they didn't have their login credentials. It is your website, and yes, you may rely on a web design company to build it, but these 3 pieces are entirely up to you. You need to own your domain. If a web company tells you, well, that's okay, we'll take care of it, thank you very much. I'll work with you to set it up, but you as a business owner need to own your domain. It needs to be your GoDaddy or your Network Solutions domain name account so that the renewals come to you. The second thing is you need to know your hosting passwords. You need to know all of the passwords associated with your account. This is your business. This is an asset of your business. It's not that you don't share it with the company that's doing the work, but you need to have control, because at the end of the day, this is one of the most important tools of your website, and you should not turn control of that over to anyone else, or not turn ownership of that over to anyone else. And the third part of the control is planning for updates, putting in a plan to regularly update the elements of your website. Questions? Reach out to me at Lorraine@roundpeg.biz. Also, I'm happy to take questions now.